Good morning, First Baptist family. It's Pastor Howell here. It is Friday, July 3rd, 2020. I hope you're having a great week and a good Friday as we head into this Independence Day weekend tomorrow as we celebrate our nation's independence and our freedoms that we enjoy. One of the very first freedoms, and indeed the first freedom in the First Amendment, is freedom of religion. And so we have an opportunity on Sunday to enter into God's house and worship, whether it's in person, on site, 8:15 or 10:45. We'll also have online worship at 10:45 through Facebook Live. So I encourage you wherever you are. If you're out of town, maybe traveling this weekend, maybe spending time with family, we hope that you will join us at least online 10:45. But we will be worshiping really with the freedoms that we enjoy in this country, knowing ultimately that our freedoms are from the Lord, and He has given us those freedoms. And we are thankful to Him, and particularly the opportunity to come into God's house and to worship Him in spirit and in truth, to lift up the name that is above every other name, the name of Jesus. Of course, worship is not just for Sundays. Really, our whole life should be an act of worship. And particularly during this time, not only of pandemic, but just of unrest within our nation. Now more than ever, the church and Christians are called to have a positive impact upon our culture and upon our communities and our nation. And so this Sunday we'll be out of the book of Nehemiah, actually, as we look in Matthew chapter 5, in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, one of his most famous teachings about how believers can have maximum impact in our culture and in our communities, indeed in our families, in our places of work, in our country. And that's to be the salt and light that God has called us to be. Indeed, in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 13 through verse 16, Jesus says this, and He's speaking to us today as believers, as followers of Christ. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. Now, salt is not only a preservative, but salt is also an enhancer. And salt here has the understanding and principle of truth. And so God's people need to stand for truth. Jesus Christ Himself, as John chapter 1 reminds us, came as a perfect example of both grace or unconditional love and truth. It's not either or, but it's both and. And so as we are impacting our culture, we must stand for the truth, and we'll be talking about that on Sunday. Jesus goes on in verse 14 to say, you are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. As believers, we are called to shine the light of Jesus Christ in our culture, in our community today. That's how Jesus said we will have maximum impact upon those that we come in contact with. Verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. And so we'll be talking about that on Sunday as we gather for worship, about how we can have a maximum impact as believers, as the church, by being the salt and being the light that Jesus has called us to be. We want to share with you as we enter into worship, particularly if you're going to be with us on site in person, due to the recent New Mexico public health order, particularly regarding mask or face coverings. We are requesting and strongly encouraging folks to wear masks, particularly when they enter and exit the building until they get to their seats and as they leave and exit the building. So if you do not have a mask, we've got masks provided for you. We've got folks in our church who have underlying health conditions, some of whom would love to come back to on-site in-person worship, but right now simply are not able to do that. So we always want to think of others even more than ourselves, and regardless of our own personal opinions about mask wearing and face coverings, we want to make on-site in-person worship as safe an environment for as many people as possible. So on behalf of our staff and just as your pastor, I would just request and strongly encourage that you would wear a mask or face covering, particularly as you're entering and exiting the building this Sunday. But we come into God's house knowing that God is ultimately in control, and we worship Him. And so we have that wonderful freedom on this Independence Day weekend to be able to come through the doors of the church. No one keeping us out. We certainly don't want to go back the other way and don't want to have to be put in a position of having to decide whether we continue on-site in-person worship if there is another lockdown order. And so we want to continue to be able to offer in-person on-site worship as well as online worship. And so I would encourage you, if you're here in the area in Carlsbad, join us 8:15, 10:45. If you're not here in the area or out of town, tune in 10:45 live, or you can watch anytime after that on Sunday on Facebook Live. But we hope you have a great rest of your Friday, and we'll look forward to being back with you tomorrow. Very, very special Independence 4th of July message. But God bless you, and we will see you tomorrow.